Mike, awesome to have you on the call. Look, there's so many different avenues we can go down, but appreciate you being here.
Not a problem, Ollie. It's great to be here.
Look, there's so many different ways I think we can go with this, dude, even down the traveling space, the business space, and I think everything in between. Just before we do, look, I'm finding it hard to actually summarize how much stuff we could sort of look at here. And I think if we could just give the listeners a quick sort of 30-second, 60-second summary of what you do, where would you start?
Okay, well, I'm the chairman of a group of companies called the Circle of Excellence Group, and they work in the personal and professional development space. And we help conscious leaders and entrepreneurs play a bigger game. We've got clients in more than 50 countries around the world. We're constantly on the road. I do a lot of speaking, as I have done for the last 20 years, and I'm very well known in the speaking industry. We write books and we sit in boardrooms at different weird and wacky places around the world, even in Dracula's castle a couple of times to have a board meeting. So we always look at each other, my wife and I, and go, well, that's just another day in our lives after something weird and wacky's happened.
Yeah. So, Mike, where I want to go with this is, there's so many different discussions we can have, and we can go down the sort of business growth strategies and tweaks all day long. But I think at the end of the day, you're in a space where you're trying to, from the outside, you're trying to optimize life, not just for the success factor, but certainly the overall enjoyment and travel and experience component as well. And I guess for you, the first question I guess I'd like to ask is, in all these boards and all these growth strategy meetings, what is something that you see that if you could change one thing the business owners you talk to, what would it be?
Oh, it's for them to have a stronger sense of self. People often ask me on these type of calls, Ollie, why do entrepreneurs fail? And my answer is always because they don't know who they are. And back in 2016, Forbes magazine came out with an article on conscious leadership, and it said a conscious leader's role is not to save the planet. A conscious leader's role is to do the deep work inside themselves so they can turn up as the best and most authentic version of themselves. And I think, what we've got today in the world is people becoming less and less authentic, particularly when they get into a role or something like that. They're in a boardroom, they're in a company, they think they have to be something. We're actually telling them to bring more of your internal essence to what you do. In other words, bring more of who you are to what you do. And that's going to make you more relaxed. And, we really only help people with three things: prosperity, freedom, and purpose. And you alluded to those in what you just said. So if I could give anybody one tip, it's to bring more authenticity into what they do and be more themselves.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space. One of my favorite books is that Alter Ego, and I think it's a really interesting space of these different masks that allow you to look at your life through still being your authentic self, but being aware of the type of person you're approaching that. Because probably the way that you approach the CEO role might be different to how you talk to your kid or how you talk to your mother, right? And there's certain
Yeah.
versions of you, but it's still an awareness of, I guess, coming back to your authentic self. And, my wife still works in the corporate space, and it's fascinating to see where those funny little nuances or frictions come up between the sort of self-employed space versus the employed, and certainly in government roles where we're doing marketing, but marketing is kind of this completely different in regards to those types of industries, right? And I think for her, she's got a very true sense of who she is, and she's very much like the person that walks into any room and everyone likes her because there's an awareness of who she is. But you see those subtle tendencies and judgments that are coming through all the time of stripping away layers of what that might be. So, dude, that's a massive topic. I didn't even expect we kind of go down, but I think it's a really interesting one to explore a bit further because
It's a funny topic, Ollie, because you're based in New Zealand. One of my good friends is Shane Cortese, who's a very well-known actor in New Zealand. And I remember having lunch with Shane once, and he was working on a show called The Almighty Johnsons, or Mighty Johnsons, I think it was. And it's a bunch of people in Auckland who become these Norse gods. And he played Loki in the show. And I said, how's it going? He said, it's interesting, because he said, during the day, I'm Loki. So I'm like the god of war who can, just point at somebody and they turn into fire. And then I go home. My wife says, you're late. Take out the garbage and do the washing tonight. I'm tired. Right. So he goes, I go from that extreme to that extreme. And I think we've all got that, the biggest CEO in the world, probably holds his or her mouth once they sit down with their mother or their grandmother. Right. So, it's about understanding that these are only roles and these are not who we are.
Yeah, it's a really great distinction. Thanks for adding that in. I was actually going through a training last night with a lot of our business owners, and one of the suggestions that one of the members brought up was this idea of like a personal success ritual that they do on holiday, right? Intentionally, when you're away from the day to day, you give yourself that space to think and set targets a little bit differently. And the amount of times that he'd done this in rooms where he said, like, set those big, massive goals that without any limitation of resources, time, money, whatever else, what would those be? And you see these full grown adults go, oh, great idea. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, great idea. Oh, no, I can't do that. Right. And it's that block that's sort of created between what we'd really like and what the normal sort of society's brought in. So the awareness of how often that's built up and what that looks like even on a day-to-day basis, it's super interesting to see. Looking at that through more of the lens of talking to a bloke a couple of weeks ago, again, very successful business owner. And his exact statement that absolutely stuck with me from there was, look, I feel like the alpha in the boardroom and I don't feel like an alpha in the gym. And for us, obviously working in the health space, it was the space where, like, regardless if I wanted to do the activity or not, I've got a level of proficiency in the sales cycle or replying to the email or leading this team.
Yep.
That regardless of whether I want to do it or not, there's consistency that's just built into just the confidence behind what I do. I apply that to a gym setting or a health space where I feel like it's something I'm a bit out of practice with, I don't feel that great with. And it starts to become, I don't know if it's nearly tying into the authentic piece, but an awareness of sort of knocking on the door of, hey, here's an area that you're less proficient in or haven't spent as much time on. And I think there's a lot of people that avoid that real quick. And I think, certainly from my experience, if you get clear on who you are and what that person would do on a day-to-day basis, for me, I get more aligned on the actions that applies, and then it just becomes a no-brainer to add those extra things in.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely, Ollie. And there's a process that we all go through, and a lot of people know it, but I'm going to make it simple. When you start to do something, you don't know that you don't know. In other words, if you pick up a golf club, you don't know whether you're going to be able to smash it, 200 meters down the fairway or miss the ball. Then when you first have your first shot, now you don't know because you've like whacked the ball, but it's gone 3 meters. At that point, once you've done that a couple of times, there's a decision line that comes in. And that decision line is, do I want to progress with this or should I just regress and forget about it? And that's what happens to everybody when they go to the gym, right? They go to get to that decision line. And so then if they decide to progress, then they go into the, okay, I can do it, but I don't really know how I'm doing it. And then the last part is like the Tiger Woods is like, I can do it and I know exactly how I'm doing it. But I think what you deal with all the time and what we deal with as people who want to go to the gym and want to get healthier is we'll go to the gym and, like I travel a lot. So like I'll go to the gym in a hotel or something and I'll go 15 minutes. The type of gear I like to use is not here. And there's too many people in that I'm out of here. Right. So there's nobody like you helping me get through that progression line. So there's always the propensity to regress. The same happens when we're doing a business skill, or if we're a CEO and we've got to learn how to sell something, right? We have the same issue. So many people, we teach a lot of people marketing and sales and positioning and things like that, all the stuff that you need in business. I have so many people go, oh, I tried your sales thing, it didn't work. We go, how many times did you try it? They go, once. We're like, try it 100 times and then you'll find out it works like 90 of them, right? In the first 10, it might work 5 times, right? So, but people don't do this. And I think that's what, I feel for you guys that are in the health space because you're constantly trying to, get people over that line from regression into progression.
And you mentioned it before, which is it's that incompetence or unaware incompetence, right? Which is I don't know what I don't know, which is, okay, I can learn something new. I'm motivated. It's hard, but I'm as motivated as possible. And then I become aware that I'm incompetent, right? Which is I now know the things I'm not doing, and now it feels really shitty. And that ability to get past that line to do things more often, there's a couple of things to really build on from there. Where I want to go, I guess, with you, you mentioned a really cool quote that I don't want to, or I guess stat that I don't want to miss before we go a bit deeper into more of the systems or habits to really keep on top of it. Because big picture, the alignment aspect comes back to being not drained, grumpy, and pissed off because you haven't slept for 3 days, right? There's a level of consciousness that we need to take care of. Now, you being someone who selected a life that's fairly an avid traveler, you brought up this quote that said only or less than 7% of people are not obese when they're selecting this sort of avid traveler lifestyle, right? Because there's so much movement, there's so many things that aren't structured. And I'm guessing you see this a lot, but there's an opportunity to simply slip or splurge or do it tomorrow at every opportunity when you're traveling to different scenarios. And from a a rest and recovery standpoint, certainly from a performance standpoint, that's probably something that I assume you appreciate. So what are some of those key habits that are non-negotiables no matter where you are in the world to make sure you show up as your best?
Well, I think the first one, Ollie, is mindset. And, if you have a 9 to 5 job and, 4 weeks a year, you've got your holiday, and for those 4 weeks, you're going to go to Europe, it's your holiday. Go to Europe, have a good time. Maybe you shouldn't eat pasta every day in Italy, but have a good time. But I think if you're a person like me who, well, I'm on the road 9 months a year, right? So in a lot of corporate jobs, traveling is your life. If you're a consultant, for instance, you're flying between Auckland and Wellington, or LA and New York, or Sydney and Perth, or something like that, and you're doing that every week, then you're not on a holiday when you're going to, Barcelona or something. This is your life. This is your business. So you have to set up your business and your life the same way you do at home, or else you're going to fall into the trap. The biggest issue for travelers, and that statistic, I remember where it came from now. I was telling Ollie off screen that I couldn't remember the author because my wife read the book, but this guy did 14,000 studies of research documents into health before he wrote this book. And that was one statistic that stood with me. 7% of people who travel regularly are not obese. So the biggest thing for us is that we have to live on the road as we would live at home. So what does that mean? What it means is that I can't control what a restaurant puts in my food. So they can tell me it's all natural ingredients. Now you go to America and you realize suddenly, there's sugar in your Caesar salad. I mean, it's you can't control that to a large degree. But what I can control is eating at home. So we always make sure that if we're in a place for more than just a couple of nights, we have a place with a kitchen. So we don't book places that don't have kitchens. And so the first thing we do, if we're in a place for 3 or 4 days, we get a place with the kitchen. Like I'm away in 2 days. It's only local, but I'm away for about a week. So we've got a place with the kitchen. First place we go is the supermarket, and we buy what we normally eat at home. I'm not saying we don't go out. We'll go out once or twice, but we do that at home anyway. So we're controlling that. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure that you sleep. Sleep is the most underrated and most important part in my mind of health. You have to sleep. We have a lot of Malaysian clients, and I can email them at like 3 a.m. their time, and they tend to respond. I always say to them, when do you guys sleep? Oh, they go, oh no, we get a few hours here and a few hours there. And I constantly say to them, you're looking tired. You need to sleep more. So that would be number 2. And I think if I was to give you a third one, it would be, there's a lot of great places in the world. Instead of catching some Ubers around to see things, as you're traveling, make sure you walk every day. And one of the great things about us when we travel is we tend to do a lot more walking than we do if we're home. So that's actually a really good thing. So I'd put those 3 things down. And then from there, I think you've got a good, solid basis for a traveler.
Those are great, Mike. I really like those, and the space to look at it through your sort of personal anchors that you keep. And I think you actually added a really important distinction of, look, if it's one trip where you're away for a week, you really create those special moments where you're probably doing a couple nights out than usual. There's probably a couple more late nights. But if this is your lifestyle and getting an awareness of this is, 1 or 2 weeks, if not more of the month, well, this is the larger majority that we need to control. And I had a really interesting discussion with a couple of clients in the last couple of months around flying business or first class. And I asked, what's the benefit of that to you? Right. And they were like, all of these different answers, right? You've got the lounges, you've got the fancy food, you've got this nice lie down bed. And I said, well, at the end of the day, it sounds like you want to feel fresh on the other side of this trip, right? Rather than being crammed up to 10 other people and being stuck in this position. The reason you go first class to a degree, or at least I think business first class, you're really going the extra splurge, is to have some room to be recovered on the other side and really be in a space where you get off the plane and you feel fresh enough to kind of go with the day, right? And for 2 or 3 guys that I talked to on this, it was a really nice shift of, I don't pay more to feel crap at the end, i.e., there's this free wine and this free cake and all this stuff that as soon as I get halfway across the flight, I'm like, why did I eat that? I've now had more alcohol. I feel that I can't change that time zone. My sleep
Yep.
quality therefore is crap. It's really, as you said, I think that's where you find that beautiful alignment of who is your authentic self. Are you someone that sees yourself as making the most of these opportunities and at all costs, and you don't mind feeling a little crap at the end? Or are you someone that really is trying to select what you purchase in order to feel good and have a great overall experience? It's up to a personal choice, but I think it's a really nice way to just simply be intentional in those moments rather than get pulled back into the childlike state of, well, there's free cookies, so I got to eat them all.
Well, that's the thing too, Ollie, is I think, and that's the big number four that I didn't mention, but this goes for at home is just stay away from takeout and processed foods, right?
Mm.
Just get rid of that stuff out of your life. I mean, we're both vegetarians. Actually, we're plant-based. I don't even know what we are. There's no word for it, right? But we're plant-based. We don't eat meat. I occasionally eat cheese. I eat egg whites. I don't eat egg yolks because there's too much fat in them. And my wife doesn't eat cheese or eggs. So, right, I guess she's vegan. So, but
Mm.
you can't get, if you think you're set up for vegan around the world, and there's all these new vegan restaurants with that rubbish burgers and things that look like chicken and that, we avoid those like the plague, right?
Yeah.
So we just go and order plants however they come. So, but what we do is we stick away from anything that looks processed in any way. So we've gone away from, we used to love fine dining restaurants. I don't like them anymore because fine dining has gone from good food to a bunch of chemicals to make your food look pretty on a plate.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to all the Michelin star chefs, but that's essentially what every fine dining restaurant I've been in the last 5 years has been. And then I think the other thing is you just get rid of takeout out of your life. And when I'm talking takeout, I don't have to tell you what it is, but you know what it is, folks, right? So, we were at a function the other night, and a woman there said, "Oh, shall we dial in some KFC?" And we're like, "We've got to go."
Yeah.
It's just you just got to avoid it, or else you're just going to pay the price, and the price is hefty. It's
So what
really
is that for you,
hefty.
Mike? Because I think there's a really nice angle to go down, which is most people at that point, knowing that they've spent any time in the house space to understand that there's these lower quality oils, there's these extra toxins, there's all this crap that's going to make you feel shitty. But you get to that spot where it becomes convenience, not choice, right? And you're selectively leaning into the uphill battle, which is choice of this might be slightly harder for me to make, but it's an intentional standard that I set for myself. And I think that's a really nice one to dive into for a second. So what is it?
Well, I think for us, we try and keep food as simple as possible.
Hmm.
So we don't try and make like the next biggest thing. So a dinner for us is cauliflower, very few carbs at dinner time. But if we do have carbs, we don't put oils or fats with them
Mm,
because we know that puts weight on us.
okay.
So I love pasta, but I don't do sauces with pasta, right?
Hmm.
So it's a small thing to change. It's that style of thing. We stay away from like sodas and things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like, oh well, I'll just have a Coke, or the worst kind of Diet Coke. I mean, Diet Coke probably means you're going to put on 10 pounds if you start drinking it. So
Hmm.
I mean, it's like tea, coffee, water. I don't drink alcohol. My wife loves a wine, so good quality wine and stuff like that. It's just keep it simple.
Mm,
And if you strip away all you can dress up, a great meal with a lot of great herbs.
yeah.
And there's no doubt about that. And we use the air fryer a lot. So
Mm,
we don't travel with one. We do travel with a blender. I have to say, we
yep.
have a travel blender, so we can blend things on the road, which is really small. Like, it's the size of the microphone that you've got in front of you. So, but it does the job. But just keep it simple. It's the same thing across the whole of life, right? Keeping it simple.
And I've got that theme from you, I think, as well, right? You've got the classic, Apple microphone. You've got the chair to sit in to do the interview. It's keeping things simple across the board. But I
Oh,
really
I've
like.
actually got the Samsung microphone. I'm just using this because I'm getting
Oh,
feedback in this room on my last podcast. But yeah, you're
okay.
right. I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
the Apple earpiece. I like to keep things simple.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the one thing I'm trying to get across there is that personal threshold or personal standard that doesn't waver. And I think whether you're going through, so as I'm sure you do, seasons where you're able to consolidate, you're spending a bit more time at home, you're able to get back into some sort of routine and time zone, versus when you're on the road, you're spending a night and then moving to the next one, and there's a bit of chaos going on. There's going to be a natural tendency to see things shift slightly, right? A couple kilos here and there, a couple nights sleep that are a little bit less than ideal, but it's kind of knowing how to get things back on track. Because for you, you've got a standard, I guess, you hold to yourself from a personal performance standpoint, and letting that just be like, oh, well, I'll wait till Monday or next January is no longer an option, because you simply hold yourself on a day-to-day level, which I really like. Look, I want to give you a quote that I'm a little bit obsessed by for now, and then I can probably go a different way with what this looks like more
Okay.
operationally. And it was simply by Cal Newport, which was, when quality is the goal, we build antibodies to busyness. Now, for you, it seems with the amount of travel that you have, there's going to be a level of demand placed on your time that you've got some pretty key constraints in place that you need to be very aware of what those high leverage activities are, what's on your plate, what's delegated, and what's simply said no to. Share some sort of framework that you either use personally or something that you find very helpful with clients in general to make sure they get intentional what they're saying no to, because I think that gets more and more noisy as you start to have more and more of them on your plate.
Oh, you don't realize what a Pandora's box you've opened here, Ollie. I mean, no is I won't say one of our favorite words, because we don't like saying no at all, but we find ourselves using it often. So first thing we do is our year is planned in advance. So if you ask me where I am on the 16th of November this year, I could tell you, right? So we sit down in September the year before and we plan exactly where we're going and what we're doing. And then what we do is we book into those dates. So for instance, we've just come back from 4 months in Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, and Indonesia. So we were away for 4 months. Christmas was inside of that. So that was a month sort of doing nothing, putting our feet up, but the rest of it was time doing stuff. So
And how much of that
anything.
is business versus personal? How much are you intentionally planning for business versus it just, I'm going to go and I'm
We
location
work
free?
4 days a week. We work Monday to Thursday. So Monday to Thursday, we are pretty much full on.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say full on, we're meeting people for breakfast, we're meeting people for lunch, we're meeting people for dinner, we're running events, we're on Zoom calls, we're running our staff that are around the world, that sort of thing. Friday, we tend to do nothing. Friday's a creative day, so I tend to write. I've got 14 or 15 books that they had to come from somewhere. So
Yep.
they sort of came from Fridays. And we don't work weekends. It's very rare. Well, I mean, we do. It would be, somebody's going to go, you're a liar. I saw you work a weekend. We probably work 4 a year where we're running events on a weekend. But if we do that, we have other days off. We normally have around 10 weeks a year off.
Mm-hmm.
So our work time has compressed down from that to this. So that's really good because, it allows you to, have very full days where you're not mucking around doing stuff. But with that, you have to say no to a lot of things. So we've said no to a tremendous amount of things, which I don't think any of them have ever affected us and what we do or what we've become. And most importantly, we say no to a lot of potential clients. So we're really, really strict on who we take on as a client. The minute somebody looks the remotest bit needy or, you guys have to do this and I'm expecting you to do that, we'll send them to somebody else. Our clients, and I'm happy to say that it's been, if any of our clients are listening, they'll probably do this for a joke, but our clients, it's been probably 20 years, probably since I started doing this. I don't think I've ever had a client who has complained to us about anything. If we take a couple of months off, last year we had 3 months off. We actually got married in 2022. We took 3 months off for a honeymoon, and our clients are like, oh, have a great time. We'll see you when you get back. Make sure you post on Facebook. So, it's about controlling the narrative of which you bring people on. It's controlling the narrative of how you onboard them and what the expectations are. So we do a lot of work early on with clients in expectations management. And of course, we have a team, so we make sure that the team can service those clients when we're not around. So, you've got to build a life that's on your terms. And so many people say I'm busy, and I go, why would you want to be in busyness? Isn't the role of business to give you prosperity, freedom, and purpose? And the second word in that is freedom. So freedom to do what you want, when you want, wherever you want, with whomever you want. And so therefore you have to be discerning about what that is. So the only way you can be discerning is if you have the ability to have walkaway power. And the only way you can have walkaway power is if you start to really do the yards, so you know what you're doing and know exactly, we call it who's your leaser. In other words, who's your client. They don't have profiles, they have names. And then that's who you're chasing, and everything else becomes superfluous. It's, we fire rifles, not shotguns.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I like, again, that this ties right back to the alignment piece, because we see this across the board with contractors, business owners, is who's that client, and be okay with saying no. No matter what the price tag is attached to it, there's another tax being paid there. And I think just getting awareness of that intention, I've seen it far too many times where I still remember a conversation I had with a client a couple of years ago who was in the structural engineering space, right? And he was just seeing dollar signs, the next job, the next task. I can just do 2 more today, that sort of thing, right? You're missing your kids' class, you're missing the sports game, all of these things, and it's just one more dollar sign, one more thing. And I think just getting very clear on what that alignment looks like was it was from the outside initially fairly obvious, but internally it's just this hamster on the wheel that just trying to really break things down and get an awareness of how much that's breaking other areas of your life. And I think simply, and maybe you've been through this transition with certain clients as well, potentially with yourself, is, well, what does enough really look like, right? Because there's still billionaires out there that are searching for more. And I think your version of, I had a fantastic chat with a bloke this morning who's very much in the mental health space, and getting an awareness of that personal scorecard of all those areas that can work. And if you're at a 9.5 out of 10 financially, but you're a 2 out of 10 mental health wise, or learning, or something like that, it's a really nice reflection. I think it was a fantastic podcast, really going through that discussion of just insight into intention, right? And I think from what I know of you so far, is there's a fairly intentional way that you're living, and you've got that design piece of ultimately working from there. So
I saw a guy get out of a Lamborghini in a Zimmer frame once, and I thought, that's never going to happen, right? Why would you want to work all this hard to get everything you thought you wanted, and only to be not healthy enough to enjoy it? I have a saying I've said to a few people over the years is, when we die and when we pass on, they don't bury you with your Mercedes, and they don't bury you with your beach house. The only thing that goes with you that doesn't survive on the planet are your memories. So life's all about creating the most extraordinary memories. And that's what we all should be focusing on.
Yeah, there's a quote I use a lot, which is, the man that can afford the beach house is usually the one that can't enjoy it. And I think it's a really interesting space of looking into that mental chatter that you place on yourself. And it sounds like you've got some nice routines that you probably spend some time on, right? To get away from this busyness that starts to build, and that you can see that happen as internal noise in your brain when you're like, I'm really excited by this, I'm really enjoying it, and I might as well just do a Friday and Saturday just because, right? And I think training the muscle of work is something that's got you into a spot where you're working with the people you do in a level of freedom that you have. But I think at some point there's a threshold where you're like, hang on, I understand that this is now bleeding into other areas, and I need to take inventory of where that's coming in. For you, is there whether it's more of a physical health component, whether it's simply a mental chatter and you start to notice you're a little bit more short with your wife or with others in your team, where's that personal barometer for you in regards to, I need to reel it back in a bit more, I need to simply simplify a bit?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I'm not sure I've got that one totally covered, but regular breaks. So if I work too long without a regular break, and I'm even talking Monday to Thursday, because our Monday to Thursdays, we've got 5 companies, we trade in 50 countries, stuff happens and it's busy. We've got different partners everywhere. It's busy, right? We lead a busy life. But I'm talking about, for me now, I'm noticing at the age I am now, about once every 6 weeks, I need to have a break. And it was so funny during COVID, because we have a Chinese doctor that we go to. And actually, in fact, we're heading to him this morning after this call, because it's early morning where I am today. And during COVID, we went and saw him, and he said, Mike, I prescribed travel for you. And I'm like, dude, it's lockdown. He goes, right. He said, no, don't you? I know you can't go out of the country. He said, but you guys need to take some 3-day weekends. So we started doing that. Every second weekend, we go away for 3 days. my mental health was fantastic the whole way through COVID. My physical health was great, etc. So that's my barometer. So you mentioned before being short with people. I think being frustrated, like I do suffer from anxiety, right? So I know that if I go like this and my hand is shaking a little bit, then I'm going, right, you're just pushing the boundaries a little bit. You got to back it off a little bit.
Mhm.
So, but it's it's the getting to the maturity of the person to say, right, well, that next $100,000 deal or whatever you're chasing is irrelevant if you're a wreck, right?
Yep.
So it's still going to be there in 3 months. Dolph DeRuse was Robert Kiyosaki's property guy. He's a New Zealander. And he told me once, he said, Mike, the deal of a lifetime comes around every day. And that stuck with me. So I think, for any of us who are in business, don't worry about the deal you lost today. Another one's going to come tomorrow.
It's a nice way to look at it. I certainly think for myself, we're all built into a space of that sort of FOMO of, well, maybe that was the one that I let go, the one that got away. And I think we really beat ourselves up on that space of, well, we could have worked a little bit harder, or that internal critique that comes through, right? And I think we certainly noticed that in the house space of this sort of all or nothing attitude. Well, if I didn't do it 100%, well, I can't give myself permission to feel good at 80. And I think that's very much reinforced in
Yep.
those deals that the one we missed. So pretty interesting way to look at it. And for you, obviously, across these different companies, you've got, I'm assuming, some management teams in place to really manage that when you're on the road and all these other things coming through. What's one of the main things that you really make sure that you instill across companies where, I think for many, there's a sort of urgency addiction, as you said before, or we said before, the sort of urgency towards business without it being simply an outcome aspect. I'm a big fan of sort of the outcomes over hours. So it's not necessarily, as you said, waking up at 3 a.m. to reply to a Slack message is not my version of an effective team member. It's more a case of what do they own and how do we make sure that they really feel they move forward. What does that look like for you across those different companies and really making sure that you have that energy built into each of them? What's one core thing that you're trying to instill there?
Very similar. Very similar. Firstly, there's a premise. Nobody works for us. People only work with us.
Okay.
So that means that we're all here, right? So there's
Yep.
no corporate structure where somebody's a CEO and people run away because they're scared when they come in the room or anything like that. Secondly, is we don't care how long people work. We set goals. We just want the goals achieved. If the goals aren't achieving, come and talk to us and let's work out why they're not achieving. It's normally one of three things. Number one is it's generally a training issue. People don't know how to go about something. So then you solve that. So then it could be the second thing. People are not doing it. Then you need to manage that. Or it could be the third thing. The market shifted and what you used to do before doesn't work anymore. And I can promise you that in this day and age, Ollie, that's a big one, right?
Mm.
That happens a lot. And, it's one of the biggest things we find ourselves advising clients on. They go, oh, I used to do this, but it's not really working anymore. And like, hello, the market's moved. So the market's moving very rapidly now. So, you've constantly got to keep up. But, everybody's looking at AI and all of this sort of stuff. I just wrote an article for We Have a magazine as well, which comes out in print. And I just sent my article off to the editor of that magazine. It's another company we don't run. But and my article is Forget AI, Remember RI, Relationship Intelligence, right? I can't tell you how much. I mean, there's not really any AI that exists on the planet at the moment anyway. It's all augmented intelligence. People are just calling it artificial. But the fact of the matter is that all of these things that we've got, some of them will help us improve. But if I see one more picture or one more email that comes to me that's written by ChatGPT or an AI thing, I think I'll throw up, right? So I'm saying, give me the human being back.
Yeah.
And it's only been a couple of years of us in this stuff. I'm already sick of it. And I know that a lot of people are as well. So building those relationships, I think, is another key aspect of what we like the people that work with us to do all of the time, is to actually meet with people and actually get on Zoom calls or phone calls or face-to-face, go networking, do all the relationship stuff. Isaac Newton he said, every action has an AI and online only. The more people are running further away from it and going to offline. You choose which part of the game you want to play at.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it just feeds into that always on culture, right? Where, coming back to your example of your Chinese doctor recommending travel. It's that space of breaking up the day in some form. And it's certainly something that we're in a space where everyone's getting busier and getting less done, because it's just this reactive nature of I'm replying to more Slack messages but not actually getting my tasks done. And I think it's a real intentional honing of focus and trying to, buy some of that back. But I want to
100%.
I want to circle back to that for a second in regards to how to switch off, because for you, and I'm very similar in regards to, at minimum, I'll make sure that there's some sort of exciting holiday that I'm looking for, that's an intentional week or two at least away once a quarter to really build towards. And in between, there'll be things that are sort of, once a month, there's at least some sort of domestic travel. Once a quarter, it doesn't necessarily have to be international, but fairly, intentionally a week or two away. And that becomes a really nice way for me to feel like I've got key blocks where I'm focused and key blocks where I'm out. And I think it's really that, for me, an appreciation towards the best athletes in the world. They do the same amount of activity. They just spend so much more time on one, that preparation getting into the event, and then that recovery coming back out. And I think as a business owner, there's a lot of credit or merit in looking at yourself as an athlete, right? Because that ability to really pour into that preparation and recovery, if you don't, ultimately it just ends up being work all the time at like a third of the effectiveness, right? So it's really that space of giving yourself that pause.
Absolutely. And I think these are the things you learn. And athletes are a perfect example of that. I mean, in our client base, we're almost thinking of starting the Olympics, because we have an ex international rugby captain as a client, a professional golfer as a client, an ex-Olympian as a client, and one of the best cricketers in the world as a client. So we have those, and they teach us a lot. So I think the first thing is to look at the game time, and game time is, I have a different way of talking about it, so I'll use my terminology rather than athletic terminology. But I look at it as, I have run and hide days. So today's a run day, right? So I started my day at 6:30 a.m. talking to you. So that's the start of my day. And my last meeting today is at 5 o'clock, right? So the day is like boom, 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 boom with things. That's a run day. But I can't do run days every day of the week and every week of the year. That would kill me. So I also have hide days, like Fridays. Friday's a hide day, right? So we don't even look at our WhatsApps. I don't look at emails. If I open the computer, all of those programs are closed down. I close them down on Thursday night because I'm going to write on a
Mm.
Friday. So that is a hide day. And then we have days that are intermediate days. So in planning a year, I'm looking at peak periods where we'll be running. So for instance, last year we were in 21 countries, and I think we did 17 of them in 3 months. So that was a peak busy 3 months, and most were European based. Started that European tour with 2 weeks in Greece with a cruise for 14 days. So we sort of like to, and that's almost like your prep. So lying on the beach, you're thinking about, right, I've got to fly to Antwerp, and then we're doing this, and then we're going to, Utrecht in the Netherlands, and then we're going to Reykjavik in Iceland. And it all sounds very exciting, but you also know that you want to make time when you're in. It was our first time in Reykjavik in Iceland. You want to make time when you're there to actually see things, not only just meet with people. You don't want to go all the way to Iceland to sit in a boardroom. So there's things you want to do. So you've got to make sure that you can press a couple of days in there. So we managed to press 4 days in there to look at things. So it's that intentionalism that comes in the pre-planning, and then sitting down afterwards, like on our cruise ship, sitting in one of the places there with our journals and talking about, well, what went well, what could have we done better? And, who are the fascinating people we met? Who do we want to continue relationships with, et cetera, et cetera. And then having a plan to intentionalize that as you move back into your normal life. I think that's pretty much how we do it.
Yeah, that's really
So it's a
nice.
combination of run and hide. And then in the middle of that, there are ordinary sort of days. And my sort of ordinary days are normally Thursdays. So my
Mm.
Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are pretty busy generally. My Thursdays are sort of like, they're my catch-up type of days. And when I do the stuff that, I don't really want to do, but sometimes you have to, like telling your accountant what this expense is for, or some darn thing like that. I don't know. And then Fridays is something different. And I think you asked a question about switching off. Switching off to me is, I'm a musician. Like I was a professional musician for 12 years. So I look at it as it's a mindset. Um, just out of picture here, I've got one of my amps, right? So I look at it and I would think of it as I just turn the amp off, pull out the plug. So that's how I see it. So I literally, at the end of a day and at the end of a week, I literally close my laptop and take the leads out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And so funny how you can use mindset for different things. I have another friend of mine's, another very well-known New Zealand actor. He said he was getting in trouble with the tax department because he'd never pay his GST and he was always late. So he thought, I hate doing this. How am I going to do it? So he came up with a concept. He would go and buy once a month, he'd buy his favorite bottle of red wine. I can't remember what brand it was. Cost him about $110, right? And so he'd sit down and he'd pour his glass of wine to start his tax with. Then he found out he was so looking forward to his tax, he was doing it 3 to 4 times a month and he was becoming an alcoholic. So, you've got to set these things to these mind games, really, to have fun with the things that you've got to do that, are intentional for us to earn our livings. And, in every part of our job, there's things that you love, Ollie, and there's things that you don't get that excited about. One of the things that we did, just coming to that, which might be a great tip for people, is back in 2015, which is a long time ago now, nearly 10 years, we're in 40 countries that year. It was very difficult to run our businesses. So we had to come up with a different model. So neither of us since 2015 used to-do lists.
Mm-hmm.
To-do lists set you up for failure. You fail every day. So I hate to-do lists, right? So we came up with something where from Monday to Thursday, we only focus on 2 things: the things we want to get and what we want to groom. So grooming is about relationships. Getting is about putting revenue in your bank. So we don't do website development on a Monday to a Thursday. We don't do office work on a Monday to Thursday. We don't, I can't even remember what people do now. Everything that we do that was in that space, we outsource, or it goes in, for me, into a Thursday afternoon. So, still things that we do that we don't like doing specifically. Still questions I've got to answer for the accountant, but I don't even look at till a Thursday afternoon for that sort of stuff. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays all we're doing is having meetings, whether it's to market something, whether it's to groom something. This is a grooming meeting. So grooming a relationship, not only with you, but with your listeners as well. So that's our focus. And since we've had that focus, we've found that we can do so much more in so much less time. And anything else that is where entrepreneurs and business people spend 80% of their time is in the stuff we call grow. Writing a script, working on a presentation, sending out invoices, that sort of stuff. We just outsource all of that. Mm-hmm. We just outsource it to somebody in our team, or sometimes people outside our team.
Yeah. Look, there's so much in there. I really love that get and groom framework, and it's a really nice way to just consolidate your week. And I've heard so many different frameworks that do this, but they really come back to the same anchor. I think Dan Sullivan uses the buffer work and rest days. So it's a really nice similar model, right? To like, these days are get shit done days. These are the consolidating of those 5-minute tasks, and these are permission to unplug. And I really love that concept, and those associations with the musician days, those little anchors, those little tweaks to either be in the zone, right? The headphones on, time to work, or the unplug of the computer, it's time to unplug. And just sort of those physical anchors to really think about it from a brain standpoint is a really nice trigger.
Absolutely.
So looking at it, I want to go down one last category, which I think for you is a really nice way to look at it through this transitionary period. And you're working with a lot of clients, it seems, in certain aspects of the business, day-to-day sales, marketing, but then there's always the, as you know, the sort of smaller companies, and obviously at any size, that marketing and sales is a massive part, but usually those questions become more and more about people. And I think I'm hearing that a lot more from you, right? It's not so much what happens this week with sales. It kind of, when you have the relationships and the systems in place, it's going to work itself over the quarter, and you start to look at this in longer time horizons, which from a regulating your nervous system is usually quite a good thing. But managing the people and being able to be in a spot that, certainly from a leadership standpoint, we're trying to move out of the day-to-day into, whether it's a classic in the business to on the business, or whether, and I'm seeing this a lot recently with certainly our client base that are in their, 50s or coming up to 60, where they're actually trying to transition out of the business entirely, whether to exit entirely or to really move into more of a shareholder role. And we're starting to see that space where they're their own worst enemy, right? And where when they remove themselves from a task, they are intentionally blocking themselves back in. And I think there's a space there in the middle of working out, and maybe it comes right back to the start of this conversation of really aligning back with what you truly want to do. And what does that look like through that scary period of finally retiring or changing what that business looks like or changing how many busy days you have in a week because you got so used to it being 6 days a week every week? Where do I start in that process? If I'm that person that's really worked hard for the last 30 years, I've been the core of the business. And now I'm trying to really get rid of some level of control, or at least allow other people to really own certain parts of the business. And I find myself fighting fires still.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that you have to take, firstly, say a day, but you have to have something to do in that day. So you've got to find some other interests. You've got to explore other things. You've got to dip your toe in the water of multiple things to see what you would like to do. You know, I have one of my closest friends. We've known each other since we were 5 years old. He is the treasurer of one of the biggest banks in the world, right? You know, his salary is more than most people earn in a lifetime for a year. So, I mean, he's got a big job. And I was with him, for about a week just recently, and I say to him, dude, what's after banking? And he's like, I have no idea. He says, I am so panicking. He said, I have to stimulate my brain every day. Because he's one of these guys, he's just on his phone the whole time that you're with him. He's like, yeah, but he's on his phone. He's just like that.
Yeah.
And he explained, he really intrigued me with the differences in banking these days from what he does to what he used to do. He said he used to look at spreadsheets. Now he looks at what's going on in the hold of ships somewhere in the Arctic, right? The world has changed a lot. But what I really tried to help him doing is saying, okay, well, I know I've known him for my whole life. I know what he loves. So I said to him, right, well, you love gardening. Have you ever thought of buying a gardening center? Why don't you, you got plenty of money. Why don't you buy a share in a gardening center and sit on the board of it and start advising them? He goes, yeah, that's a good idea. I could do that. Because I'll probably end up buying all the plants in the place. I said, yeah, but just buy the garden center, buy a shareholding in it and dip your toe in the water. He's played hockey his whole life, and, he's now off all the hockey boards. And I said to him, get back into some of the hockey boards. You've still got a lot to give. Yeah, well, I could do that. So I started piecing this stuff together with him that were out of his interests. And before he knew it, he said, yeah, that would probably take up, you've probably got, at my rate of going at things, 2 days of my week covered. He said, we've only got 3 to go. And he said, I'm starting to feel comfortable about looking towards retirement. So I think we've got to do that. I've not found a recipe, Ollie, that's better than introducing ourselves to new and different things and then starting to weave those things in with our business life. For Lundy, my wife and I, we call it projects. So we already have 1,000 projects that we want to do. So at some stage, I mean, we love what we do, and I can't imagine us not doing it. So it's a different stage of life that we're in, even though, I'm over 60 these days. So, I guess at some stage I'll slow down, but I think for us, we would be moving from running businesses to running projects.
Yep.
And that project might be 3 months, and then it'll come to a natural end. Then we might go away and have a holiday for 3 months. Then we'll come back and run another project, and we might end up doing our life like that. So there are different models, but I think the weaving in and trying different things, go and try things that you think that you may enjoy. All of us who are getting into our 50s and 60s have a wealth of experience that other people don't have. And that means that we can mentor, but not just in business. We can mentor in life. We can mentor in relationships. We can mentor in sport. There's a whole range of things. I mean, I played cricket at a very high level till I was 46 years old. I could easily go and coach a cricket team and embed myself in that if I wanted to do that. And Lundy's always said, why don't you go and coach cricket team? I go, no, we travel too much to do that. But one day if I'm 80, that I might do that, Go
Yeah.
coach a kids cricket team.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to look at it, and it really actually solidifies that question quite nicely for me. I'm actually thinking of 2 or 3 clients of introducing that discussion a bit more about, because the amount of times I've done a presentation here, Mike, with a room full of business owners, and I say, "What do you do for joy?" Right, and I see 80 or 100 or however many people in the room look back at me with the sort of deer in the headlights look of like, well, "What do you mean?" Like I'm working here, and being able to
Exactly.
sort of create that space again where the reason you've got good at work is because you've done that for 40 years or 30 years, whatever it might be. And you've just got so good at training that muscle. And I think you're a really good example of this. And I've really enjoyed today's discussion around approaching the joy bucket or the rest bucket, or that space where you're actually trying to intentionally experience all those aspects of life you actually logically want to do, but emotionally you feel weird doing. And just starting to train that muscle again and getting closer to what that looks like for you. So, yeah, dude, we've touched so many different things. I think the awareness of looking
We
at
have.
really the alignment from the start, the personal habits, looking at what that looks like to give yourself permission back in your day. It's quite a wholesome discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Mike. Look, there's so many components that from today, I think I can probably go back and listen to this and get a different thing out of it. But there's a real intentional design with how you live your life, and there's some really cool nuggets that hopefully, regardless of what type of role people are in, there's an ability to really find a better system of charge to work here. And I think I've got a ton out of it. So thanks so much for jumping on.
No problem. Thanks, Ollie, and thanks everyone.